rather convoluted island up there. That's Bathurst and Melville Islands. It's about 100 kilometres northwest of Darwin in the Arafura Sea. And that's where I worked nearly 47 years ago as a young girl, and which I returned to last week to correspond once more with the Aboriginal artists with whom I've kept in touch over all that time. Aboriginality is a wound in the Australian psyche through the ruthless displacement and killings of the original Australians after European settlement, occurring together with what people call the desanctification of the exploited Australian environment. One of our great anthropologists, W.E.H. Stanner, an ordained minister and a leading anthropologist, pointed out in 1963, a tragedy underlies the rise of Australia from convict colony to dominion status. The black tribes have died out wherever the whites have overrun the continent, out of sight, out of mind. Yes. In Northern Australia, colonisation took place 100 years later than to the south, so that nomadic traditions and beliefs continued, protected by inaccessibility. The mission of the Sacred Heart was placed on Bathurst Island in 1911 by Bishop Gazelle from Belgium and staffed by nuns and brothers, daughters of the Sacred Heart, many of Irish descent. When I first went to work with the Teawe in 1974, I was part of the mission, though paid by the new Australia Council. This shows a picture of flying over the Teawe Islands in a little plane this time, about to land. There's 2 islands divided by a strait of very fierce water. And here you can see one of the artists I worked with then, a man called Jack Wamba, surrounded by his paintings. That head coming in at the side is actually me working to see what he needed, whether he needed more materials or colours. So our job, I was there with my husband. He's sadly since died, but we were there to foster the traditional arts, because in the time of the Whitlam government, long before most of you were born, I suspect, there was a great resurgence of belief that Aboriginal communities were valuable in Australia, and an idea that young artists like myself could be sent there to help those communities sell their work to the wider Australian audience. Of course, this has become immensely successful. The dreaming became the English term for the stories of creation ancestors developed over millennia, an idea of the creation of the universe and humanity. Our friend Stanner wrote again that the dreaming cannot be fixed in time. It was and is everywhere. It is composed of a kind of narrative of things that once happened, a kind of charter of things that still happen, and a logos or principle of order transcending everything. And perhaps you can see in this idea of a time that can be accessed at any point from the presence, a kind of similarity to the Greek Orthodox idea of kairos, the sacred time, which is always in the present, as we just experienced in the liturgy. Early anthropologists, missionaries, and settlers, products of the Industrial Revolution in Europe, were deceived by the material simplicity of the nomads. But really, the dreaming can be seen as the metaphysical expression of primordial truths that trace the birth of the world and the human place in it. Really, Christianity tries to do that too. And when I worked there with monks and nuns and fathers on Bathurst Island, I was very pleased to see how the older men, the Teawe men, always talking about creation stories and trying to align the major creation ancestor, Purukupali, with Christ. They saw the consonance between the two, and in fact did not find it difficult to be both Christian and Teawe. This is the abandoned mission that I took this photo about 10 days ago. So this is the old mission hospital of the Sacred Heart with a very decayed statue of Christ standing over the wild garden. There's only one nun left, Sister Anne Gardner, who was Senior Australian of the Year in 2017, whom I know well. And this is what the nuns and mission settled amongst, this extraordinary ceremonial and art of the Teawe people, which has recently been celebrated in a major exhibition at the National Gallery of Victoria. I was asked to take photos of this ceremony in May 1974, a funerary ceremony run by Geoffrey Mangatopi for his son, who was tragically killed. It went on for 2 or 3 days with people chanting by memory all that time. So you may talk about material simplicity, but the linguistic complexity of the Teawe language and the complexity of thought that underlied that very simple way of living was extraordinary to me at that time and still is. Chrysavgis described the way of life of the desert fathers and mothers as the reversal of all ordinary social values and expectations of productivity. They had a different set of values, where inaction may be the most powerful source of action, and where productivity may be measured by obscurity and not individuality. The sayings of the fathers enhance the simplicity of existence: a stone hut with a roof of branches, a reed mat for a bed, a sheepskin, a lamp, a vessel for water or oil. The desert fathers made their living by making baskets or ropes, varying the long hours of prayer by the search for materials and the manual labor of weaving. This is Jeannie Karanawa making a bark basket outside her hut, which perhaps you can see has some commonality with one of those very simple dwellings in the desert, except it's made from sheets of corrugated iron nailed onto poles. So one of the sayings of the fathers from Abba Macarius is, "I took some leaves from the marsh and showed them the rudiments of weaving and how to handle the reeds. The monk's garment is woven from palm fronds and mended all over," which is another saying from the Desert Fathers. So the Teawe people invoked the first death in their funerary ceremonies, a story of the death of a child through the parents' carelessness, which brings death to the whole society. They perform the stories of ancestors who may still be a vital source, present in sacred objects, in clan designs and in names, ensuring fertility of country and humans, So when you make an object like a basket, you're invoking the ancestors. In fact, these bark baskets, which are made nowhere else, were put on top of those great carved funerary poles to stop the spirits coming out of the earth and causing disruption among the people. Rhythm, voice, and dance are essential in ritual. Chanting, like psalmody, connects you to the creation figures and is indeed, as the oral literature of the dreaming, a kind of commentary on what is thought to be permanent, ordained, and at the very basis of the world and life. And another saying from the Desert Fathers, "Shall we recite the 12 Psalms? The true monk should have prayer and psalmody continually in his heart," says Saint Epiphanius. This is a photograph of the Teawe design fabric workshop that I coordinated. That's a very different looking Diana on the left-hand side, my right-hand side, your left-hand side, with my group of wonderful young artists, the oldest of which was 24 at that time. And I'm afraid only 2 of them are still alive, which tells you something about the longevity of life in our Aboriginal North. And these patterns were derived from the ceremonial works, but they were sold all over Australia and indeed still are sold all over Australia. And when I returned last week, I saw the same designs being printed in the Teawe Design Workshop. And I would encourage you to go there and visit. They love having visits. Aboriginal dreaming continually talks about the beginning of the world and also the layers and categories of creation. My friend of 40 years, the Teawe elder Bede Tungatalam from Bathurst Island, constantly talks of my mother, Murtankala, the creation ancestor. Since I first knew him in 1974, he has made paintings of the universe. My land is coming back to me in a dream. The songs are all in my head. The images are all in my head. He described this image on your left. This is Murtangala, the old blind mother. In the image, you can see how she started all the creation, coming out of the dark and making the straight, the dugongs, turtles, fish, birds, crocodiles, and wallabies with the clan patterns. You can see people in a boat and spirit figures and ceremony poles. The likeness to parts of the Old Testament were recognized by Aboriginal elders who later became Christians, especially in relation to Old Testament stories of the desert, such as Moses striking the rock and manna coming from heaven to the children of Israel, making them kin to hunters and gatherers. Christianity and Teawe culture exist side by side. The pastor, Reverend Jinyini Gondara, the Indigenous pastor, recognized the Western churches, but thinks that Indigenous churches must be released from captivity to the individualism and rationalism of Western theology. For other Indigenous thinkers, white people failing to recognize their own dreaming are people who follow a bad law, who might cause epistemological chaos. That means a chaos of knowledge systems. And in fact, it was an Aboriginal woman, a dear friend in northeastern Arnhem Land, who told me when I was first involved with working and teaching Aboriginal culture, she said, "Diana, why are you always questioning and looking at Aboriginal religion and culture? Why don't you go back and look at your own?" So that's what I did. So here is Brenda and Conrad Tippenwuti. I worked with Brenda in 1974 when she was a little girl of 7. So wonderful to see her again. And they're all painted up for a dance presentation that they had just completed in Teawe Design. This is the big art centre. And they paint faces white and often with other patterns in order to become invisible to malign spirits who won't be able to recognize them. And the paintings, as you can see here, are keepers of knowledge. Our ancestors gave us the teaching and designs together, and we still keep them. The symbolism behind the designs can be seen by someone who knows to be in all the little details and shapes and colours of the work of art. That was Remacha Marika, another friend from northeastern Arnhem Land. For Aboriginal people, the presence of that encompassing spiritual creation period pervades every aspect of life. If you go searching for fruit or turtle eggs along the foreshore, you are stepping in the footsteps of the creation ancestors at the Jungle in northeastern Arnhem Land and singing to them as you gently move through the dense undergrowth. For Aboriginal people, for Aboriginal wisdom, nothing is nothing. Everything has a meaning. The world is made up of signs. Gallery Unapingu tells how, as a boy, he dragged a spear on the beach, leaving a long line. He was told that if you make a meaningless mark, you hurt the bones of the traditional people of that land. And this sense that nothing is present in this saying by Abba Agathon, a desert father. Abba Agathon was walking with his disciples. One of them, finding a small green pea on the road, said to the old man, "Father, may I take it?" The old man, looking at him with astonishment, said, "Was it you who put it there?" "No," replied the brother. "How then," continued the old man, "can you take up something that you did not put down?" Like an icon, a Teawe painting is a doorway one can enter, a space of belief. As John of Damascus argued, invisible things are clearly seen by images. Painting becomes visual scripture. The quality of the life of the desert fathers and mothers is as unimaginable to city life today as that worldview constructed by the first Australians, and both contain a depth of silence and sparse living that continues to throw an almost unapproachable light on my own sense of being. That's all. I've kept to the time limit, Father.
We've got a few minutes for questions. I mean, it's quite amazing the depth of discussion and her talk. I found it amazing that I was in and out a little bit, but when they did a service for, not a service, a ritual for somebody who had killed their child, obviously by accident. That's of recent. It's happened. I've experienced it twice amongst our community, and it's interesting that they work through that, dealing with that, because I mean, you think about it, killing your child, one by accident. I mean, both of them were car accidents basically. One was, the father was a truck driver and didn't realise that the child was there, and the other one was just walking along the road and was killed. So, yeah, it's quite amazing how they deal with these things, isn't it? And I also found it amazing too that when you said, with regard to Western culture, how it's a chaos, really. and the Aboriginals can see that. And the rationality and the logic of, unfortunately, our Western society and technology and everything. Maybe you can comment on that a little bit more, because you're a professor of computer technology as well. So maybe you can comment a little bit more on that. Yeah.
Yes, Father, I'm not really a professor of computer technology, just visual arts, but they're all very digital these days. Are there any other?
Aboriginal and Orthodoxy. Well, the question was, just for those who couldn't hear, why was the title Aboriginality and Orthodoxy? It really wouldn't make any difference. Both would apply, I think.
Yes, at the time, I was studying at St Andrew's Greek Orthodox Church, and I was particularly interested in early Christianity, which is Christianity all over the world before the 11th century, when we had the Great Schism. But because I was in that particular area, but I do feel that orthodoxy is grounded in something mystical. It believes in the presence of the Holy Spirit in our church, whereas the other Christianities that I've been involved with, and I was christened in Anglicanism, and I have been to the United Church, and of course I have partaken in Catholic masses a lot, but the rationalism of the non-Orthodox churches became very difficult for me. They wouldn't allow this other element. So as soon as you come into the Orthodox Church, you feel you're in a different space. And it was that different space, out of time, that I recognised in my Aboriginal communities and their desire for ritual. A good question. A good question.
And obviously, in front of the icons here, in front of our spirituality, you can see our culture, our traditions, our dance, all of this speaks loudly of, an ancient culture. So
also, yes, the orality, the voice of orthodoxy, it's about the human voice. That's what we experience when we come to church. Yes.
Real instruments. Maybe someone else can ask a question. Some of the young people.
I would encourage you all to go and work there. Do you know there are so many jobs for people up in the Northern Territory working in art centres or just helping out? And it gives you such an idea of another way of living. So that's what I did when I decided to work there, to find out about this other Australia. You won't regret it.
Say what sort of work is available, like with the government, or?
Yes, there's a lot of government work, there's a lot of health work, but there's a lot of work in art centres, just helping with administration, really. Because some of those art centres sell to all the major museums and galleries in Australia, so there's a lot of help, just packing up, documenting, writing down stories, and helping to keep track of everything and relating to the people. It's a wonderful job for a while.
You touched on the Aboriginal artwork. Could you just explain a bit of the concept behind their artwork?
Yes, certainly.
So just so everyone heard, the concept behind Aboriginal artwork.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say about, for example, this piece here, which is based on the body patterns that people use in ceremony. So they won't give a meaning. The meaning is hidden, but as soon as you see a pattern like that, you think about the other world of ritual and ceremony and the world of creation. So the Teawe art is quite abstract often. But this one is particularly interesting because it has a circle and a cross. The circle is the sign of Kulama, which is an initiation ceremony where people sit in a circle and sing. And then the cross is part of their own heritage too now because of the long-standing introduction of Christianity. The cross is often combined with the circle. So you combine Christianity with the Aboriginal ritual. So both ideas, compared to, say, the rational government stations in the Northern Territory, Christianity believed in an invisible world of presence, and that was what Aboriginal people also believed in. So although there were many divisions and difficulties, that has lasted to a certain extent. Yes, the question is about what is behind the abstract ideas of Teawe art that we see in the church, that everything is representational here. I think the connection is through symbolism. So although the icons we recognise them as people, they're hardly photographic representations, are they? They're symbolic of another reality, of a way into heaven, sometimes people say about icons. So the abstract forms of Teawe art are also a way of protecting people from malign forces. They like the abstraction. I don't know if you know that word, apotropaic, which was often used in early Greek art, which means to turn away evil spirits. You know how even today in Greece you see blue beads, the same idea. So I think it's symbolism that is the connecting point. But it's complicated because across Aboriginal Australia there are many, many, many styles of making, and I've just shown you one way today. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, well, that's wonderful. Look, I'd like to thank Professor Diana Despina, she's baptised now, Wood Conroy, for making this presentation and, of course, giving us a shining example of going to these communities and working with them to help them and to generate this beautiful art so that they can spread this message of country, of the earth, of their lifestyle throughout the world, really, because Aboriginal art does go throughout the world, as you know, through the art galleries, and very symbolic. And we're very privileged in Australia. Unfortunately, we haven't really understood this, but coming from where we're coming from and our culture and our icons and our spirituality, we are in a position to understand a little bit more. That's why we had the talk today. And Professor Diana lives down the south coast, but we look forward to having you again. Let's thank her and we will continue the discussion, and there's some light refreshments again for you inside the office, because we do have a baptism coming up inside here. That's why. So we would like everyone to, whoever's free, to go into the office. We've got some nibblies and a few other things in there for all of you. So God bless you. Next week, God willing, we'll have the Orthodox Cafe, I think, downstairs, God willing. So thank you again, Professor. God bless.